This is TWIT.
Google's Civil War. I don't know. Do you credit this article from Fortune? I do like the illustration.
I like Beth.
Beth Cowett. Oh, you know her. Okay. Some employees say Google's losing touch with its "Don't be evil" motto. Happens when you get too big. And, of course, we've seen...
They dropped that motto.
They dropped the model. Well, they sort of dropped the model.
Oh, it's like, wait a second.
Yeah. But I think they dropped it and brought it back. But how meaningful is that? I mean, it started, of course, with employee protests and walkouts and so forth. But it also could be that it's challenging as a company gets bigger to keep your vision thing going. You think?
Well, if your vision thing is predicated on technical genius above being like a nice human, which I think is a fairly common thing in the tech world, is like, hey, your tech skills or your whatever, your reporting skills, your value as a cog in the employment machine usurps your value or usurps the value of other people in that same machine sometimes.
Well, and when any company triples its workforce in 8 years, which is what Google has done, it's going to be very hard to maintain. You know, Apple has an Apple University with the sole purpose of inculcating Apple's DNA into new employees because they want continuity in Apple's beliefs. Kevin, you didn't work for Google, but you were inside Google, a contractor. Do they have anything like that?
So as a contractor, I went through some pretty, I'd say, basic training because it was only like 3 hours. And they were for day one people that are contractors. You could be a temp, a vendor, or a contractor, and you would go to this training. And it was more around protecting Google's information, being security conscious, what your NDA meant, what could happen if you broke the NDA or did something you shouldn't do, which is typical and expected. And even regular Google employees would go through that as well. I didn't really see much on values or the "don't be evil" or any of that. And one experience doesn't mean that's the way it is for everybody, but I didn't see that at all.
The other problem that Beth talks about is leaks. And she says a lot of activists, including Liz Fong-Jones, who quit Google after the walkout, don't like product leaks because then it gives management a reason not to tell employees what's happening. And so that's another problem, Programmers are getting more and more powerful. They tend to be difficult to manage anyway. I think it's really interesting that these massive companies, which really used to be able to set their, policies and then ignore the workers, because if you don't like it, we'll hire somebody else, can't because workers in some classes, some knowledge workers are hard to replace. So they have to listen to engineers who say, hey,
sometimes I think that it's not just, you just have to invest more upfront. And, we saw this at GigaOM. We wanted to hire people who were senior. We never wanted to train anybody because that slowed us down.
Yep.
It wasn't. And I would say I have become very skeptical of the talent argument in the sense that someone is irreplaceable, even if they're a terrible human being. It's hard to replace them. It might cut into your margins perhaps or slow your delivery. And those are real problems. But I think part of it is that companies aren't building a pipeline. And they kind of, and I think that's a really important thing that companies aren't doing. And yeah.
The other way of looking at this is, oh man, these entitled techies, they go to work for a company and they act as if they're in charge. That no one ever told them no when they were young, and now. And by the way, it's ruining. San Francisco, for instance, is no longer a place anybody wants to live. And there was an article in the New York Times on May 21st about how people who don't have college degrees are leaving the big cities, including New York, San Francisco, Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, because they can't afford to live there anymore. And in some ways, I think there's going to be a backlash against entitled engineers like the Google employees, because they're making a lot of money and they're changing the way cities work. And
you could argue that we're seeing a backlash against I don't want to call it gentrification. There was actually an article, possibly in the New York Times, or no, I think it was the New Yorker, on the Airbnb-ification of cities.
Yeah, it's
but
terrible.
There is something to that. Like when I walk in downtown Austin, it's very different as a city than like a city like New York, which has practical services intermixed with crazy awesome restaurants or clubs or things like that. And I think there is merit to this idea that when you have an upper middle class or wealthy class, I don't know what exactly to call it, because it's more than just the 1%, but the very wealthy who are able to live in a place and then outsource all of their services, your city becomes basically a playground for those people.
Right.
And kind of boring.
That's kind of sad what's happened to San Francisco, although there are also estimated 7,500 homeless people in San Francisco, so much so that the city council has had to hire a poop patrol to patrol the streets and clean up human excrement. And as somebody who used to live in San Francisco and now goes back from time to time, there's some real problems downtown. It's really sad.
Yeah.
And there are another problem is Ubers. People are pointing to Ubers for part of the traffic problems of some of these major urban areas, New York and San Francisco, because there are so many ride shares on the road, because apparently this upper middle class 2%ers, they don't like to drive. They like to take a nice black car service whenever possible.
Yeah. In terms of the leaks, I just want to be clear so that people understand. I assume most people know, but in case they don't, that I think it's Friday, it might be Thursday. No, it's Fridays. They have an open forum with Larry and Sergey, although I think only one of them has been showing up for the last while now. And it's basically an all hands meeting, and there's discussion about what the company is doing. There are no TVCs, no temps, no vendors, no contractors that are allowed to go to that. I know that for a fact. I mean, I was never allowed.
You can't go because even
No, and obviously it's held in the main building at the Googleplex, and then it's broadcast all over the world so people can tune in and whatnot. But it's broadcast in specific rooms, group rooms like auditoriums. So I could not enter. It would be impossible. My badge color would not allow me entry. So the leaks are coming from actual Google employees, just to be very clear there.
Yeah. And in fact, Google's clamping down on information that can be shared into internal information. They're really trying to stop these leaks. And I understand why, honestly.